seen my video and to have me make a video specially to answer your question, send me an email to englishclubusa@yahoo.com, and you can visit my website at englishclubusa.com for a free life membership. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Every English teacher says the same thing. To be able to speak English well, you need vocabulary. Well, this English teacher is different. Yes, you need vocabulary, but that's not what you need to speak English well. In this class, we'll find out the secret. Exactly. What do you need to know to speak English well? Well, vocabulary does help. Without vocabulary, there is no language. There's no question about that. But it is impossible to learn all the vocabulary there is. Medicos need one type of vocabulary. Restaurant owners need a different type of vocabulary. When you travel, you need a different type of vocabulary. When you teach mathematics, you need a different type of vocabulary. When you want to talk about relationships or study literature or history, all of those subjects need different type of vocabulary. So where do you start? It is absolutely impossible to learn all the vocabulary. So any teacher who says that vocabulary is absolutely essential to speaking English well is wrong. You don't need vocabulary. What you need to do, you need to know what to do with vocabulary. That's what all these classes are all about. However, you will say, but what is more important than anything to speak English well? And there is an answer to that question. And the answer to that question, what is most important to speak English well, is to be able to ask questions. In order to ask questions, you need special skills. You need special ability. You need special understanding. Well, fortunately, the special skills, the special ability, and the special understanding is very small. And with these classes, we will learn all the basics you need to know to be successful with the English language. And more specifically, how to ask questions. So let's take a look at a few examples and understand exactly what is so important about asking questions. Well, when you ask questions, there is a structure. There is a structure of how to think, how to plan, and how to ask questions. And step number one, when you ask any question, is imagination. If you close your eyes and imagine location in space, location in time, what are you asking? That's your step number one. You see, you don't need vocabulary. You don't need to know the topic. All you need to do is know the time. And the best way to do this is to try to imagine a line of time. A line, as we studied in other videos, has basically only two parts, because English is binary. One part is past, and the other part is future. And together they come to a present. But one way or the other, for sure, English language and English times or tenses have only two, and that's past and future. So, when you ask a question, you need to know exactly what part of time are you talking about. So, if you, for example, are talking about a past tense and you're talking about not now, what is now? Do you remember in past videos that now has two parts? The part that already happened and the part that will happen. Between a point when the video started and when the video ends. For us, now is our video. So, in fact, now only exists as two parts, past and future. But if you want to ask a question about a point in the past, just one point in the past, how do you do that? Well, there were many videos where we will specifically talk about those things in detail, but today I just wanted to give you some examples how important it is to imagine the moment in time that you're talking about. So in this case, it's one point in time. So let's look at the first example. Last year, how much did you spend on English classes? So what do you need to do in order to ask this question correctly? Well, first of all, you need to think about the location. Second thing, you need to identify for the listener which time are you talking about. That way the listener can imagine in their head immediately, before knowing what you're talking about, what vocabulary you'll be using, they will immediately imagine exactly what you imagine, and that's the timeline with a point in time. So when you say last year, I know exactly you're talking about a certain point that is definitely before right now. And then I will say, okay, the next thing is which verb do I need to use in order to identify this point in time? And as you know, and you've watched other videos, that is your simple past. It's a point in time, it's a photo of a certain moment. So, last year, how much, which is the question of money, especially when you're talking about spend, how much did you spend? So, as you remember, we had special videos on how to make questions. And this is your number one, which is your body that changes with time. This is a person or an object. And the second is your verb in a base form. How much did you spend? So when I know that last year and you say did, it doesn't matter what happens after that. I know you're talking about last year, and I know number one, you're talking about a point in time. So that right there I will have no questions in understanding exactly when what you're talking about happened. So let's look at the second example. Well, in the second example, the timeline is a little different. What we want to talk about in the second example is something that started before this class and includes the past part of the class. That means it goes all the way until now, which is two pasts. One past, yes, but then there's another identification that will tell us that whatever I'm asking did not end yet. It is still going. So let's take a look and see what identifies that situation. So, how long, which refers to time, how long has it taken you to learn English? Well, you will say, but Valerio, I heard differently. I heard a different version. I heard a different question. I heard it, how long did it take to take you to learn English? How long did it take you to learn English? And you say, but all the English teachers say it that way. Isn't that correct? And the answer is no. And the reason why no is because when you think about a line, when you are asking me how long, you're not talking about a moment in time, like we did in the first example. You're not talking about a moment in time. You're talking about from the moment you start until now. So there's no way that you can use the same formula, the same structure as you did in the first one. because you're talking about a different time. So this is why when you ask questions, it is very important to know exactly how the time reference works and how the time reference works together with the verb structure. You know that, and you basically have half of your questions done. It's not difficult. There are only very few possibilities, and we will learn all of them in all of our videos. So let's take a look how this situation works. So if I say, how long did it take? What you're asking me in about some point in time, which is right now, but that's not correct. It's not now that it took. It took starting from the past until now. That's why we have the has. Has means, literally, if you saw the videos, and we will talk about that again in other videos, has literally means until now. So you must use a has if you want to know the answer until now. And the second one is taken, which is the form of past perfect or past participle. And that in the has always 100%, no exceptions, requires a form of a verb in a past perfect or past participle. So you know that when you have to talk about until now, you have to do two things. You have to use the verb has, and you have to use the verb in past perfect. So between those things, how long, which refers to time, together with until now, which is a has, with past perfect, which is, we will talk about it, there's a special video on the verb take, and make sure that you take a look, it's very important. How long has it taken you to learn English? And that is the only correct way to ask the question. This way, there will be no misunderstanding. Everybody will understand exactly what you're asking. Well, let's look at another example and see how that works. In the second example, it's a little different. We're talking about starting from now into the future. We don't know when the future is. It will happen sometime, maybe yes, maybe no, but it will definitely not include the past. So remember we talked about that the now has two parts. One part is the past, and the other part is the future. And there's a special video that talks about two different futures, remember? The one future, which is 100% future, which is until the finish of this video, and the other future is after we finish the video. It's a beautiful, beautiful video. You should go and watch. So let's take a look to see how that works, describing starting from this point until a future simple point in time. And how we can measure time between now until that future point. And what we will do is we will ask the same question, how long, which refers to time. Then we use the word will, which is not the 100% future according to video, but it's a future probability, like 50%, maybe yes, maybe no. And then we will use the word in a base format, just like every single case. So when we say how long will it take to improve your English, now I know exactly you're talking about from this point until a certain point in the future. Well, let's look at another example and see how that works in a different case. Well, we just saw how things work with timelines, but then you will say, but wait a second, not only things start and finish, sometimes things do exist both in the past and the present, and they repeat itself. Well, I call it repetition. Most teachers call it simple present. I don't like simple present. Why? Because the name is very confusing. It makes people make mistakes. In fact, every single one of my students, when I ask them a question, what is a simple present? Everybody says it's now. And when I ask them a question, do you have a house? And they said, yes, I have a house. And I said, now? And they said, no, no. But wait a second. I have a house is a simple present. And you just told me that that's a noun. And now you're telling me now you don't have a house. So how can that be? So simple present, in fact, if you remember other videos, is not now. In fact, it's anything but now. Maybe now you do have something, but it's an exception. But generally, it's a repetition, not a noun. So, you want to find out, you buy a car, and you want to find out what type of transmission does this car have. Do you want to know what kind of transmission it has now? Did it change from yesterday? Will it change into tomorrow? Or it always has that transmission? So you want to ask a question using the time that repeats itself. It doesn't start, it doesn't finish, it always normally has. So you need to use the verb that corresponds to the format of what you want to ask about normally. And in addition to that, you're using the word what. So this is something very special when it comes to asking questions. And the reason why is that later we will do a special video and we will discuss specifically the meaning of each one of these words, including those. They're very important because every time you ask a question, for example, a question why, what are you trying to ask? And we will see that example in just a second. But people, when they hear the question why, or people, when they hear the question what, they should automatically understand that what you're trying to find out. And the question what has a specific meaning. Just think about it. If I ask you, what is your name? How many names do you have? One. If I ask you, what is your phone number? How many telephone numbers do you have? Well, cell phone and a house number maybe. But generally, people have one cell phone number. If I ask you, what time do you wake up? How many different times do you have to wake up? Or if I ask you, what height are you? How many different heights do you have? So when you want to ask a question that has only specific answers, one, maybe two, maybe three, but they are specific, you will always start asking a question with the word what. So in this case, what type, if you remember, we talked about in previous video, we talked about type and kind. Remember, type means two or maybe three or opposites, complementary. Watch the video. What type of transmission does your car have? So the answer is what? You may have an automatic or manual. So when I ask you what, I want you to be specific. What type of transmission? I don't want to know different possibilities. I want to know something specific. So you may have an automatic and manual. Those are some possibilities. But then you may have another kind of possibility. You may have a two-wheel drive car, that's one kind of transmission. Or you may have a four-wheel drive transmission. Or you may have an all-wheel drive transmission. So you either have something that's manual or automatic, or you may have something that is a two, four, or all. So when I ask you a specific question as to what, you need to give me a specific answer. If I ask you a question type, you know that I'm asking something one or the other, probably complementary, or maybe just two or three things that are possible, can possibly be the answers. So, let's look at another example. What kind of car are you looking for? So, if I ask you what, again, what am I saying? I'm saying, give me one answer. Don't give me many, give me one, because I asked the question, what? Right there, we should stop and understand. A question that starts with a what means one or two, but specific, not general. So, what kind of car? Kind tells me that there are many different kinds. So I want you to be specific among many you're looking for. And of course, for is a preposition, and there's another video. So the answer will be coupe, sedan. Coupe is a two-door, sedan is a four-door, SUV, convertible, electric, or hybrid. But those are different kinds of cars they are, and I'm asking you for a specific answer. So let's look at another example and see why these question words are very important to understand exactly the meaning, what it is, before you even listen to the vocabulary that follows. Well, we just mentioned why. When somebody asks you why, what comes to mind? What do you think about? What is a why? You say, well, why is a reason? Well, there's more than that than just a reason. Why, before you even think to answer the question why, you need to understand what specifically are they asking. Are they asking about the past, or are they asking about the future? Are they the same? Are the reasons the same? No, they're not. And the reason why they're not the same is because when you're talking about a past, you're talking about an origin of motivation. So when you want to answer the question, you need to understand where on the timeline you are located. If you want to talk about motivation, you need to talk about the past. When you want to talk about the goal, you need to talk about the future. So you need to decide first where on the timeline your answer will be. So in this case, we want to talk about the origin. So you will ask a question, Valerio, why did you create EnglishClubUSA.com? So when you say, why did you create? Because this word is in the past. I heard your question. You told me why. That means there are two possibilities, past or future. And then I was paying attention to the verb that comes next. And the next verb that came was the body of the verb, not the base form, but it was the body of the verb that represents the time that you are interested in. So if I ask you, why did you create? Okay, that type of question asks about the past, generally. If I want to ask a question about the future, I will ask the same question in a different format. That way, you know exactly what the person wants. But if somebody asks you a question, why did you do something? They're generally asking you about your motivation and the origin of your motivation. So you need to answer the question the way people asked it, hoping that they ask the question correctly. So the answer will be, remember we have this wonderful video that talks about 7 different ways to answer the question why. It's a very important video. There are many ways to answer the question why, but remember, I created a very simple system where with 7 different becauses, you can cover any situations in English language. And that way, you can be very efficient and very effective in answering the question why. So let's take a look at one example. How we're choosing the word because, which is not the best word, but I wanted to use it so it will be easy to understand. So, the meaning of the word because, if you watched the video on 7 becauses, is one reason only. So if somebody asks you why and you want to give them one reason and one reason only, and you want to tell them that no other reason was important for my decision, that's when you use the because. That was one of the 7 becauses. So, if you want to answer with one reason only answer, then you have to use the word because, and that tells me the minute you use the word because, it tells me immediately that there is no other reason. If there is another reason, or there are possibilities of other reasons, then you have other 6 becauses. Watch the video. It's very interesting. So in this case, in this example, I wanted to specifically use because to demonstrate that there was no other reason that motivated me to create EnglishClubUSA.com. So what was that one reason? And that one reason was because I could not teach as many students as I had to teach. I created my new website. So what I did was I started my answer with the reason, and the reason was there's only one reason, and that's because I could not teach as many students as I had to teach, which is my past, which is the origin. I had to teach. And this is my other past to answer the question. This is why I created my new website. So that way you can be very specific so that the people who listen to you will understand exactly what your answer is and will know exactly what had motivated you to do that in the past. So let's take a look at another example and see how that might work in a different situation. Well, we just saw a situation where we wanted to know the motivation in the past. That's why we wanted to know something. But then there's a different way of looking at it. Sometimes the motivation is not only in the past. Sometimes motivation is in the future. Or sometimes the motivation is both. So how can you possibly answer using a way to connect both sides together? Well, there's a wonderful video where I explain how to use tenses, and that tense is very interesting. It's one of the most interesting tenses in English language that very few people use. Everybody understands, but few people use because they're lazy. And I hope my students will not be lazy. So, what is that? Let's take a look at the question to see what it is. How many video classes, you're asking me, and video homeworks, both video classes and video homeworks, will, which is the future, will you have finished by the end of 2021? And you will say, wait, you have a future and you have a past and you have a have. Isn't this all wrong? No, it's all right. Because there is a way how you can talk about the future, starting with the past and having a cumulative result by the end. And there is a special structure for that. So, the way to do this is you identify the future moment, which is the will, and there's a video on that. Then will you have finished? The have means until this moment. But to have until this moment, we need to have a starting point where we start the measurement until this moment. And the starting point is a point in the past. And that's where the finished comes from. So basically when you say, how many videos, Valerio, will you have finished from this point until the end of 2021? And the answer will be, you want to know that point and you want to know that number that will happen from this point. So my answer has to be in the format of that number. And if you watch the video on the future tenses, you will understand why I used should. And just to remind you, remember, should has something to do with the rule, or something has to do with the law, or something has to do with the custom. And there is a condition involved. Make sure you watch the video. So, when you put all these factors together, when I answer the question, I'm going to put a lot of meaning into my answer. I'm going to put three things. Number one, I will tell you that there is some kind of a rule because of how many videos I do per week. I multiply number of videos by number of weeks. That's the math rule, and I get to the end of the year. So that's where the shall comes in. But then there are possibilities. I may do more videos. I may do less, but I may do more. So we don't know exactly. That's why the shall changed to should. And of course, you have the verb have, which is the experience. We will have another video on that too, which is I should have 150 experiences of video classes and 150 experiences of video homework by the end of 2020. So that means we will have a huge library of videos and homeworks that will cover most of English language. But we will not stop there. We will continue. So, let's take a look. Here in this situation, we were talking about both. We were talking about the past and we were talking about the future. Let's take a look and see there is something very interesting here, that there are ways to ask a question. And you will say, but Valeria, what is how come? How come? Does it have a meaning? Well, let's take a look. So, when you ask a question using how come, you need to watch the video on the meaning of the word come. If you don't understand the meaning of the word come, you cannot understand what how come means. And those who had watched the video, they know that come has nothing to do with movement. It has nothing to do with direction. It has something to do with time. So, when you say how come and what kind of time, it has something to do with right now. So the question is how come, that means in what way, in a certain moment in time, you decided to create a free YouTube channel for video classes and a free website for video homeworks and other videos and writing and test preparation courses. You say, how come? What does that mean? That means in what moment in time when I created, why did I do that? Is it the past? Is it the future? Well, it's a mixture. So how come gives me an ability, an open situation to answer the question any which way I want. I can structure it by starting with the past. I can tell you exactly what is happening now. And I can tell you what my goals are. So when somebody asks you a question, how come? They don't know if they need to start with the past or the future. Because they don't know. They cannot control you with the question. So they're giving you an opportunity of freedom how to answer it. Well, when you answer the question, remember, if you want to be understood, and I always say, you must be structured and informative. So it's always good to answer the question, how come, in a structured way. You start with the past, you talk about the present, and you end with the future. I hope you enjoyed today's class. I hope we cleared out why asking questions and knowing how to structure your question to understand how to structure your answer, why it's so important. This is one of the videos that we will talk about how to ask questions. We will have special videos on all of them, so you will know exactly the meaning of the word who, or whom, or whose, and they're very important. So I hope you watch the video, and I hope to see you next time. To be in my video and to have me make a video specially to answer your question, send me an email to englishclubusa@yahoo.com, and you can visit my website at englishclubusa.com for a free life membership. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell.